Okay, so wow. Things are getting kind of wild in the world of global trade right now.
Yeah.
We're going to take a deep dive into President Trump's latest move to put some pretty big tariffs on our neighbors.
Right.
To the north and south, Canada and Mexico.
Right.
And also China. And we've got a whole bunch of news articles and expert opinions that we've been combing through to figure this whole thing out.
Mm.
So I guess the goal today is really just to try to understand why these tariffs are happening in the first place and what they could mean, not just for the U.S., but for everybody else too, right?
Yeah, for the global markets.
Yeah, and for the global markets.
For sure.
And how it could all actually end up affecting, you, me, and everybody listening directly.
Absolutely, and we're already seeing that play out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the markets, the Dow dropped almost 600 points.
Oh, wow.
It erased all of the gains it had made since Trump's reelection.
Really?
Yeah, and the S&P 500 had its worst day in a very, very long time.
Oh, gosh.
Even the NASDAQ, which is usually, pretty strong, is teetering on the edge of what's called a correction.
A correction?
Yeah, that's Wall Street jargon for a drop of 10% or more.
Oh, wow.
From a recent peak. So, yeah, things aren't looking so good.
So that's a huge market freakout, huh?
Oh, yeah.
But why? Why such a strong reaction to this?
Well,
it's not like tariffs are a brand new thing, are they?
True. Tariffs have been around for centuries.
Yeah.
They're essentially taxes on imported goods.
Right.
It's designed to make them more expensive.
Yeah, to encourage people to buy, American.
Buy domestic products.
Okay.
But the thing is, investors, they really hate uncertainty.
Makes sense.
These tariffs, they kind of throw a big wrench into, the gears of global trade. And that makes it hard to predict, how the economy is going to perform in the future.
Right. So if you can't predict it.
Yeah, if you can't predict it, you don't want to put your money in it.
You don't want to risk it, right?
Exactly. And so people pull back their money, and that's why we're seeing these massive sell-offs.
Oh, so it's kind of like a domino effect then.
It is a domino effect. And it's rippling across markets in Europe and Asia, too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's global.
So it's not just us.
Not just the U.S.
Okay, so let's get into the actual details here.
Okay.
We're talking a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum coming from Canada and Mexico.
Right.
And then an extra 10% on top of the existing 20% tariff for goods from China.
Wow.
So that's a lot of extra costs added on. And, at the end of the day, it's going to hit consumers' wallets.
Oh, absolutely.
In a big way.
Yeah, and it's not just, numbers on a spreadsheet we're talking about.
Right.
Actual everyday things that people need.
Right.
Like groceries, gas.
Yeah.
Maybe you're thinking about buying a new car or finally doing that home renovation you've been putting off. All of that is going to be impacted by these tariffs.
So how much more are we talking? Are we talking a couple extra bucks at the grocery store or
Oh, it could be more than that.
Really?
Yeah. For example, I was reading that you could end up paying an extra $3,000 for a new car.
What, $3,000?
Yeah, because of the tariffs on the imported parts and vehicles.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
It is. And gas prices, those could jump by 30 or 40 cents a gallon.
Ouch.
That's going to hurt.
It is. It's going to hurt a lot of people's wallets.
Right. And it's not just some, theoretical thing. This is money straight out of people's pockets.
Exactly. Real money.
Real money.
Out of real people's pockets.
Okay, but what's the point of all this? What's the driving force behind these tariffs? What's the goal here?
Well, one of the main reasons that's being talked about is the flow of fentanyl into the U.S.
Oh, right. Fentanyl.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
It's a huge problem. A major public health crisis.
Right. And the administration is saying that these tariffs are going to help, stop it or at least slow it down.
Yeah, that's the argument.
But is that really going to work? Is putting tariffs on goods really going to solve something as big and complicated as the fentanyl crisis? That's a good question, and I think...
It just seems that there could be so many unintended consequences from something like that.
Exactly, and I think it's important to remember that Canada and Mexico aren't just going to take this lying down.
Oh, yeah, of course not.
They've already announced that they're going to retaliate.
Oh, really?
Yeah. China is targeting U.S. agricultural products with tariffs of their own.
Oh, wow.
And Canada's hitting back with a 25% tariff on $16.5 billion worth of U.S. goods.
What?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is.
So it's you hit me, I hit you back kind of thing?
Yeah, tit for tat.
And so then that raises the question, are we headed towards a trade war?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is a big question.
A full-blown trade war.
And I keep hearing these two different sides to the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got some people who think that these tariffs are just a negotiating tactic.
Right. Yeah.
A tough one,
Yeah.
but one that's necessary to like force the other countries to give us what we want.
Yeah, I've heard that argument too.
But then there's all these other people who are like genuinely afraid that this could turn into like a huge drawn out trade war
Yeah.
that would end up hurting everybody involved. So who's right?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but, history has some lessons for us here.
Oh, really?
Have you ever heard of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act?
I don't think so.
It was back in 1930,
Okay.
and it was supposed to protect American jobs during the Great Depression.
Okay, so it was supposed to be a good thing.
Yeah, on paper it seemed like a good idea, but it actually ended up making things way worse.
Oh, wow. So it backfired.
Big time. It raised prices for consumers, choked off international trade, and most experts agree that it actually made the Depression longer and more severe.
Oh, gosh. So we really don't want to repeat that.
No, we don't.
Okay, so this is definitely a tricky situation with a lot of moving pieces. And honestly, one of the things that's most concerning to me is like just how uncertain everything feels right now.
I agree.
Like, are these tariffs just temporary?
Yeah, are they a bargaining chip that's going to go away, or are they going to be here for a while? Or are we really headed for like a long and damaging trade war?
And what's the impact going to be on like regular people, businesses, and international relations?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
A lot to think about.
For sure.
Well, speaking of international relations, what did Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau have to say about all this?
Oh, well, he didn't hold back.
Oh, really?
He called the tariffs a very dumb thing to do.
Wow.
And he even accused Trump of wanting to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy.
Whoa, those are fighting words.
Yeah, especially coming from a close ally.
Right.
I think it really shows you how seriously they're taking this.
Yeah.
This isn't just about economics anymore.
Wait.
It's about relationships.
Yeah.
Decades of cooperation and trust could be damaged because of this.
It really feels like we're in uncharted territory with this whole thing.
Yeah, it does.
Like these tariffs could totally reshape how the global economy works.
Yeah.
And the impact could last for years. Yeah, for years to come.
So what should we do?
I think the most important thing is to be informed and to really think critically about what's happening.
Yeah.
Don't just take the headlines at face value. Dig deeper, explore different viewpoints, and consider all the possible consequences, both good and bad.
That's good advice.
This story is just beginning, and it's one that we all need to pay attention to.
Yeah, we do.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we've been talking about like this potential trade war and all the ways these tariffs could affect our relationships with Canada and Mexico.
Right.
But I think before we go any further, we should probably take a step back and like really break down what kinds of tariffs we're even dealing with here.
Yeah.
Like, can you help us understand like the nitty-gritty details? Like, what are the different types of tariffs that are in play here?
Sure. So you've got two main categories of tariffs.
Okay.
There's ad valorem tariffs and there's specific tariffs.
Ad valorem?
Yeah, I know, right? It means according to value. And that's exactly what it is. It's a percentage of the value of whatever goods are being imported.
So like in this case, the 25% on steel and aluminum from Canada and Mexico, that's an ad valorem tariff.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about the tariffs on Chinese goods? Are those ad valorem too?
Yeah, so that extra 10% on top of the existing 20% for goods from China, that's also ad valorem.
Okay.
But it's important to remember that those are in addition to, existing tariffs that were already in place.
Right, right.
And some of those could be what are called specific tariffs.
Specific tariffs.
Yeah, which are a fixed dollar amount
okay.
per unit of goods.
So instead of being like 25% of the value, it's like $10 per ton of steel or something like that?
Exactly, regardless of how much that steel actually costs on the market.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the percentage, but also like how they actually calculate it.
Right.
Okay, so that definitely adds like another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But like at the end of the day, what does all this actually mean for like the average person? Like how are these tariffs actually going to affect what we're paying for things?
Whoa.
Like, everyday stuff.
Imagine like you're saving up to buy a new car, right?
Yeah.
You finally have enough, and then you walk into the dealership and suddenly that car you've been wanting is $3,000 more expensive.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. That could be the reality for a lot of people because of these tariffs on imported parts and cars.
Wow.
And it's not just cars. Everything from groceries to that home renovation project you've been thinking about could get more expensive.
So we're not just talking about like big purchases. We're talking about like basic necessities too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the things we buy every day are either imported directly or they're made with imported components.
Right.
For example, a lot of our agricultural products come from Canada.
Oh, yeah.
So these tariffs could mean higher prices for things like meat, grains, vegetables, all the essentials.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, like, everything's going up. And we can't forget about gas prices.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, the elections is already expensive, and these tariffs are probably going to make it even worse.
Yeah, because a lot of our oil also comes from Canada. And if they put tariffs on those imports, we could easily see gas prices go up by, 30 to 40 cents a gallon.
Ouch. Okay, so it sounds like price hikes are pretty much inevitable at this point.
Yeah, that's looking pretty likely.
But here's something I've been wondering. Like, are businesses just going to eat the cost of these tariffs?
Right?
Or are they going to pass that cost along to us, the consumers?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and honestly, it's probably going to be a mix of both.
Okay.
Some businesses might try to absorb some of that cost so they can stay competitive,
Yeah.
But in the end, most of them are probably going to have to pass at least some of that cost on to consumers through higher prices.
Right. So either way, we're the ones who are going to end up paying more.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so we've talked about these price hikes that are probably coming, but I want to zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture here.
Okay.
Like, what are the potential long-term consequences of this trade war?
Right.
Beyond just like what it's going to cost us at the grocery store.
Well, I think the biggest worry is that this could turn into a tit-for-tat escalation where each country keeps putting more and more tariffs on each other's goods,
Right.
and that could lead to like a major slowdown in global trade,
Yeah.
which ultimately would hurt everyone.
Right, because we're not like an isolated economy.
Exactly what happens here affects the whole world.
And haven't we learned from history that trade wars are like never a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, these protectionist policies like tariffs might seem appealing in the short term.
Like to protect American jobs and stuff.
Right, exactly. But in the long run, they usually cause more harm than good.
Like the Smoot-Hawley thing.
Exactly like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act.
Right.
It was supposed to protect American jobs, but it just made the Depression worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, history's kind of repeating itself here.
And it's not just about economics either.
Right.
It's about our relationships with other countries.
Exactly like we've been saying, Canada and Mexico are more than just trading partners.
Right. They're our allies.
Exactly. And these tariffs could do some serious damage to those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, Trudeau's reaction was definitely not positive.
No, it wasn't.
And I could definitely see this escalating into something much bigger.
Yeah, wouldn't take much.
And then there's China, too.
Oh, right.
They've already started retaliating by putting tariffs on our agricultural products.
Right, which could have a big impact on American farmers and businesses.
Yeah, so that adds even more pressure to the situation.
It does.
Okay, so there are a lot of potential downsides here.
Yeah.
But are there any potential upsides?
Well,
Like, is there any chance that these tariffs could actually achieve some of the goals that the administration is aiming for?
I mean, some people argue that tariffs can actually be a good way to protect domestic industries and jobs by making imported goods more expensive.
Yeah.
They can make domestic products more competitive.
Okay, I see.
And that could lead to, more production and job creation in certain sectors.
So like a made in America kind of boost.
Yeah, kind of like that.
But like, how do we know if the benefits are going to outweigh the costs?
Right. That's the big question.
Like, what if the tariffs end up leading to even higher prices for consumers?
Right. And what if other countries retaliate?
Yeah, then it seems like the economy as a whole would actually be worse off.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure which way it'll go.
So it sounds like there are a few different possibilities here. Like maybe they'll reach some kind of agreement where everyone comes out okay.
Right.
Or maybe this will turn into a long trade war with some pretty bad consequences.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll be something in between.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
Well, it is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
We talked about the different types of tariffs, how they could affect prices, and like the bigger economic and geopolitical consequences.
The big picture stuff.
Yeah, so where do we go from here? What happens next?
Well, that's a good question.
All right, so we've talked about all the different kinds of tariffs and the potential for price hikes and even like a global economic shift. But like the big question is still out there, like what happens next?
Right.
What are the different ways this could all play out?
Well, I mean, nobody can predict the future with like 100% certainty.
Of course.
But based on what we know so far, There are a few different possibilities.
Okay.
Like one scenario is that these tariffs are mainly just a negotiating tactic, you know? Trump has a history of using like pretty aggressive tactics to try to get what he wants from other countries.
Right.
So it's possible that he sees these tariffs as like leverage in trade negotiations.
Okay.
And that he would be willing to like roll them back if he gets the concessions he's looking for.
So it's like he gave it chicken.
Yeah, kind of.
But with really high stakes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's risky. Well, what if the other countries don't back down?
Right.
What if they call his bluff?
Then what?
Then we could be stuck in a trade war for a long time.
With no winners.
Right, with everyone losing in the end.
Okay, so let's say that happens.
Okay.
Like, what would a worst case scenario look like?
Well, in a worst case scenario, these tariffs could stay in place for years.
Years.
Yeah, maybe even decades.
Oh, wow.
And the retaliation could just keep escalating.
Like back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. With more and more tariffs getting added onto like a growing list of goods. And that could cause global trade to like completely freeze up.
Oh, God.
And then we could be looking at a global recession.
A recession.
Maybe even a depression.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it would be really bad for everyone.
And what about our relationships with our allies like Canada and Mexico?
Right. Well, if this turns into a real trade war, those relationships could be seriously damaged.
Yeah.
I mean, we've said it before, but it's worth repeating. These countries are more than just trading partners. They're our neighbors and our allies.
Right.
And this could erode like decades of cooperation and trust.
Yeah, it could affect everything.
Exactly. Everything from defense and security to environmental agreements.
I mean, Trudeau's reaction definitely showed that there's already tension there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it wouldn't take much for that to escalate into something way bigger.
Right, something that would be really hard to fix.
And then there's China, too.
Oh, yeah.
They've already retaliated with tariffs on our agricultural products.
Right, which could really hurt American farmers and businesses.
Yeah.
And add even more pressure to the U.S. side.
So we've talked about a lot of potential downsides here.
We have.
But are there any potential upsides?
Well,
Like, is there any chance that these tariffs could actually do some good?
I mean, some people argue that they could.
Okay.
They say that tariffs can be a way to protect domestic industries and jobs. Because when imported goods become more expensive, domestic products become more competitive. So that could lead to more production in the U.S.
Okay.
and more jobs.
So it could give the U.S. economy like a boost.
Yeah, kind of like a Made in America boost.
Right.
But the question is whether those benefits would outweigh the costs.
Right.
Like, what if it leads to much higher prices for consumers
Yeah.
and retaliation from other countries?
And it seems like it would actually make the economy worse overall.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
really tough to say for sure what's going to happen.
So basically, we've got these different possibilities.
Yeah.
We could end up with a negotiated settlement where everybody's happy,
Right.
or we could get stuck in a trade war with really bad consequences, or maybe something in between.
Exactly.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. And that's why it's so important to stay informed and to think critically about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on headlines or what you see on social media. Like, do your own research. Read different perspectives and come to your own conclusions.
That's good advice.
This is a story that's still unfolding. And the decisions that get made in the next few weeks and months could have ripple effects for years to come.
So we've tried to give you the information you need to understand what's going on.
Right.
But now it's up to you to stay informed and to think critically about everything you hear and read about this. That's right, folks. Knowledge is power. So stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask questions. And until next time, happy diving.